Thank you, Holly. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so today's topic, as mentioned, is all about maps. It's a product which Microsoft, well, kind of changes the name a little bit. Sometimes they call it Microsoft Peering Service, sometimes Microsoft Azure Peering Service. But in the end, it's all about providing anybody who wants to a straightforward and easy way to establish direct peering with Microsoft. So let me share my screen and then we can start. There you go. So a little bit of an overview. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit of how does it work, and actually what is it really, and why does it have Azure in it, and what's the difference between the peering you can have through Azure and that's really internet peering. For those of you who are LINX members, I will also show you a little bit how easy it is to order this service if you're already connected. But at the same time, even if you're not a LINX member, it's probably useful to see how easy it is once you are a member to order this service and establish direct peering. And as Holly has said, feel free to ask any question in the meantime. If not, we'll also leave a little bit of time at the end if there are any further questions or anything you want me to go into more detail. So what is it? So Microsoft has a number of AS numbers, and those of you who are using Microsoft Azure probably realize that there's kind of two different networks. So AS 8075, which is Microsoft's public AS number, and really the original AS number, and that's what Microsoft Peering Service Maps is all about. And then there is AS 12076, which is the AS that you see if you're using any Azure services, you have your compute platform or storage or VMs within Azure. So this is not about establishing a BGP session with 12076, but this is all public-facing services from Microsoft. Why is it important for you to have good connectivity, as direct as possible connectivity with 8075? Well, if you are using any Microsoft, well, call it Microsoft Software as a Service, anything that's part of now Microsoft 365, formerly Office 365, and the service around it, Microsoft Dynamics, any of those services, obviously you probably want to make sure that your connectivity between your own network and Microsoft's network is as good as possible, as close as possible, you're directly connected to them as possible. If you are using Azure services, you're using public cloud services, and you don't have a direct layer 2 connection into Azure, i.e. Express route, but you're using an IPsec tunnel or even SD-WAN connections into Azure, this can still be of use, since obviously that connectivity, that traffic would pass through the public facing network of Microsoft, so 8075, and then within your tunnels you would have your BGP sessions with 12076. It's also, Microsoft is very clear that through internet peering, so Microsoft Peering Service, you're not allowed to announce any prefixes from 12076, since they're kind of internal. So how easy is it to establish peering with Microsoft? Well, Microsoft has an open peering policy, but it's an open peering policy that is selective. It means in order to establish peering, direct peering with Microsoft, you need to fulfill a certain number of requirements. Microsoft makes a difference if it's what they call internet exchange peering, meaning you peer with Microsoft through an internet exchange like LINX, or direct peering, meaning you have a direct, well, would call it private peering, a direct physical connection to a Microsoft router. If you want to use internet exchange peering, and their requirements are that you have minimum a 10 gig connection to the exchange, which for especially smaller networks might not always be the case. And your peak utilization on those ports needs to be below 50%. You also need to have a minimum of 500 meg of traffic, of Microsoft traffic, from your network to Microsoft or the other way around. But it should also be less than 2 gigs of traffic. So it's kind of a relatively specific range. And these, I've taken these straight from Microsoft's peering policy. For direct peering, Microsoft has by now moved on that it needs to be 100 gig ports only. They don't do anything else for direct peering. You need to have a minimum of 2 ports, ideally in different locations, and it needs to be a minimum of 2 gigs of traffic. And even more, it is actually only available to ISPs or network service providers. So if you're more like a small medium enterprise, it is actually not even available for you to use that. So as an outcome, even though it's an open peering policy, it isn't necessarily always possible for you to get direct peering with Microsoft, with 8075. And that's really the main reason why the Microsoft Peering Service maps why it exists. In the end, and LINX is one of a number of partners that Microsoft has. A lot of them are internet exchanges, where the partner kind of becomes the middleman to establish that direct peering between your network and Microsoft. It means you kind of the restrictions that I mentioned before don't really exist. They're not valid. They are you can any network can use this service and get direct peering with Microsoft, but you still get all of the other benefits that you need. It's still a fully resilient setup, even if you use it with whoever partner you choose. Even if you choose LINX, it's still a fully resilient setup. So we have resilient connections with Microsoft. We're going to talk a little bit more, and you could even combine it using this service for multiple partners if you wish to do so. Bandwidth and it varies a little bit by the different partners. It depends a little bit on their setup. In the case here, I'm talking about the LINX setup. The bandwidth you can choose anything starting as low as 50 meg per second up to 10 gig per second if you wish to if that's your requirement. We see that a lot of networks obviously heavily depends on your type of network, how you're using Microsoft services, how much your traffic is. It's quite a flexible setup, and in most cases, same for us for LINX. You can adjust the bandwidth over time if you realize you need to increase the bandwidth or you need lower bandwidth. And in the case again of LINX, you can pretty much, if you're already a member of LINX and you already have a port connected to us, you can pretty much set it up within a couple of minutes through our self-service order forms through the portal. We'll show you a little bit more about that later on in this session. There is one term that you're probably going to hear quite often, a term which stems from probably the older days, called potato routing, which is really the description of how any network decides to reach destinations. Do I keep the traffic as long as possible on my own network, or do I try to get rid of it as soon as possible? I save the bandwidth on my network and make it exit my network as soon as possible. In this case, cold potato routing is what Microsoft does, meaning they try to keep the traffic within the Microsoft network as long as possible, bring it as close as possible to the end destination, to the customer. So in this case, if you're using a partner which provides you with the Microsoft Peering Service, it will stay on the Microsoft network until that access point and then go straight from there direct to the customer. Gives you pretty much a good control of how the traffic flows. Obviously, you have control in the other direction, and Microsoft makes sure that it stays on their network as long as possible, and keeping the part of the network that you don't have control over as small as possible. So how does it actually work? Since it is direct Microsoft peering, but works slightly different. As said, Microsoft does this with partners. A lot of the time, partners are internet exchanges who are doing this and provide the setup, which is really predefined by Microsoft, how the required setup is supposed to look like, to make sure that it is up to the standards that kind of Microsoft expects it to be, and it's of course in everybody's interest to do so. So in this case, it always works the same way, and that's how it's implemented with LINX. The partner kind of provides a closed user group, i.e. A separate layer 2 instance, separate layer 2 network across, in the case of LINX, across our network fabric. At the moment, this is available across our LON 1 network, meaning you can subscribe to the service to from all of the sites where our LON 1 fabric is available. So we're operating a closed user group purely for this service. So there's no other traffic in this network than traffic from our members using the Maps service with Microsoft. As part of that closed user group, we're operating 2 root servers. We're operating 2, for those less familiar, in the end, they're root reflectors, but root servers in the case of internet exchanges. We're operating 2. They are in 2 different locations on our network. Again, that's part of it being a fully resilient setup. This same closed user group also has direct physical connections to Microsoft's network. And again, it's fully resilient. So we have 2 different locations where we interconnect with Microsoft. In this specific case, we have the ports with Microsoft, ones in Equinix in Slough, and the other ones are in Telehouse in the Docklands. So it's fully resilient from end to end. We have BGP sessions established between the root servers, both of them towards Microsoft, and each root server has peering sessions to Microsoft, so they're resilient on each way. Any member, any customer who wants to use this service, the only thing he needs is having a port on our fabric, and on that port having a connection into that closed user group. So that can be an existing port, or it can be a port dedicated for that. Any other member customer who uses it is the same way, will have a connection into that closed user group. But that closed user group, as we said, is only used for this service. So there's no other traffic in there. And the member establishes, then you establish BGP sessions with the root servers. We allow you to do that over a single port, but obviously our recommendation clearly is that if you want to maintain the full resiliency end to end, to have two different ports. But even if you have a single port, you're still able to establish a BGP session to both of the root servers, so you maintain at least the resiliency in the whole rest of the setup. But clearly, the recommended setup is to have two different physical connections onto our fabric and use the service from there. The peering you have with the root server, those who are using internet exchanges and using root servers, the concept is very familiar. So you're not peering directly with Microsoft 8075, but you actually, your BGP session is with the AS number of the root server. In the resulting AS path, the way root servers are set up, that ASN is never seen in the AS path. It's hidden. But it's purely there for your BGP session with the root servers. So you establish those. You announce your prefixes that you want to be announced to Microsoft, to both root servers, and they get passed on to Microsoft straight away. They get tagged with a special community, so that they are recognized within Microsoft's network as peering service prefixes. And that's as much as there is to it. So it is technically a relatively, it's a very simple setup. It looks very similar. Again, those who are using peering across internet exchanges, especially if you're using root servers, it's very similar. There's nothing new there. It's a well-proven way. Obviously, the only prefixes you're going to receive from the root servers are going to be Microsoft's prefixes. So from that point of view, it works slightly different than normal root servers, where you would see prefixes from everybody who's connected to it. So these are set up in a much stricter way. Your prefixes get passed on to Microsoft, and Microsoft's prefixes get announced to you. So on your router, in your routing table, after you've received the prefixes, they look like exactly the same as if you would have a direct peering session with Microsoft.
Mike, sorry to jump in there. We've got our first question.
Sure.
Is Maps available to LINX Scotland members?
It is currently not available to LINX Scotland. We hope that we can change that in the future. There's two different two different elements which block us at the moment. The first one is that the LINX Scotland network is currently, well, should we say, based on older hardware, still very valid and very well working hardware. There is a plan to replace the fabric during this year. So it's a little bit harder for us to make services like closed user group, which this is based upon, available. But the more important one, currently the only thing that would do, since the only exit points that Microsoft offers, they are in London. So it wouldn't really make any significant difference. Your traffic would still have to pass down to London. It would make it easier. Of course, you could get the direct peering, but it would still be traffic that goes down to London. So it is something we are keeping an eye on what our options are. We might be looking into working with partners if we can long line the traffic down to London. But at the moment, unfortunately, it is not available in Scotland nor in Wales. It is actually today. It is only available on LON 1. We hope to bring it to our other fabrics throughout either next year, following year, depending on. It depends a little bit also on demand. Yeah, so member setup, customer setup. As I said, I pretty much mentioned probably most of this already. You can provision this on one of your existing ports, or you can order a new port dedicated for this if you prefer to do so. Each connection that you have into this closed user group, you will get works very similar again to peering LAN. You will get an IP address assigned from the prefix that we have assigned to that closed user group. So we assign an IP address, and you establish at least one BGP session with each of the Maps root servers, and you announce your prefixes to the root service, and you receive the Microsoft prefixes. All pretty straightforward from that point of view.
Sorry, Mike, to just have you again, another question. Will you provide the prefix key?
So we can provide the prefix key, and we can talk about that. So for those who are not as familiar with the setup, so there's two elements to the Microsoft Peering Service. The second part is actually not strictly necessary, but if you want to, since in theory it will just work if you do nothing, even if you configure nothing at all at the Microsoft end in your Azure portal, it will still work since Microsoft accepts the prefixes. If you want to have the peering service visible in your Azure portal, and you want to make use of some of the additional functionality that Microsoft provides you in the Azure portal regarding your prefixes. So as we provision it, we provision your ASN. We set up your ASN as a registered ASN in as part of the peering service, which means it then allocates a prefix key, which looks very similar to your Azure service key. So we allocate a prefix key which we can provide to you, and that means you can go onto the Azure portal and document your prefixes and get visibility, a little bit additional visibility of your prefixes within the Azure portal. Yes. So how do you order it? So this is obviously this is very specific if you're an existing LINX member, if you're not a member yet, but it is just one of the services that is available through our member portal, that you can directly provision there. And let me see, it's always an interesting thing to try and show this live. Let me see if I'm still logged into our portal. I'm not going to do an end-to-end provisioning, just going to show you what is visible, how it would work if you want to order this service, either if you have an existing port or if you don't yet have. So you log into your portal, you go to orders, you request a new service, and this is under the port-based services, and you will see there is Microsoft Azure Peering Service, which will also answer the question, well, how much does it actually cost? You can see it's ready. You can see it on our website under the service fees, but it will also tell you as soon as you start the ordering process. As you can see, you can either I'm logged in as LINX here, so not all of this is. But this is it's one of our ports. We can use that for at least to show you. So as we said, it will show you a list of your ports depending on how they are configured. There is this concept of what historically we called multi-service ports. By default, the LINX port gets configured as an access port, meaning it's a simple flat port, one service. If you want to use additional services on your port, i.e. have your peering service and then use other services, we have to convert the configuration of the port to what we call multi-service. Basically means it becomes a trunk port, and it will show you on this list if your ports. It will show you in the encapsulation if it's .1q or not. And depending if it's a port, if you already have a port that's multi-service, that's .1q, you will see it in the list. If not, you will still see it in the list, but it will tell you that it needs to get converted first. Or you could simply order a new port. In this case, let's just pick an existing port. As I said, I'm not going to, since this is the live portal, I'm not going to go end to end, but as you can see, it's currently the default is chosen 50 meg. It will show you, in this case, the monthly charge would be £30. but you can adjust the bandwidth, as we said, up to 10 gig, depending how you need it, how much you think you need. And in addition, you just need the additional, we obviously need you to choose your AS number. Again, that's a little bit, most members have a single AS number. If you have multiple ones, you will be able to choose it. Tell us which VLAN ID you want to use this on. Tell us the MAC address at your end. And that's really all the information we need. We said that we normally, our recommendation is that you that you build that as a fully resilient setup, so have a second port. But you could complete the order with just one service across this, or if not, you can add the second port that you want to use, which either again could be a second existing port, or you could order a new port, or use an existing port for the first service and use a new port for the second service. The bandwidth of the map service on both ports obviously needs to be the same, since otherwise there is no point in resiliency. So it for the second port it will just reuse the same bandwidth, and that's it. If your port is already a multi-service port, so it's already set up as a trunk port, it will straight away pass on to provisioning, and within a couple of minutes the service will be provisioned end to end and ready for you to set up the BGP session at your end. You will get your IP address in the email that confirms that the service has been provisioned. Once you configure the IP address, it will have the details of the root service. You configure your sessions to the root service, and you're up and running. And it will work without you setting up anything in the Azure portal. But as I said, if you want to use the additional functionality that you can have in the Azure portal by adding the Microsoft Peering Service as a service in Azure, you can do so. We'll provide you with the prefix key, and you're good to go.
Brilliant, Mike. Just got a couple of questions here. So is it a fixed cost or is it per usage?
It's a fixed cost based on bandwidth. So it's a monthly charge based on the bandwidth that you subscribe to. It doesn't matter. It's not really how much you're using it, but you're subscribing to a 50 meg or 100 meg of bandwidth, and that's what the charge is based on. And that's a fixed cost. Obviously, if your requirements change, you can always go and adjust the bandwidth of the service, upgrade or downgrade as you need it. But it's a fixed monthly charge based on the bandwidth that you have chosen.
Perfect. And next question is, does the additional port cost more, or is that included in the monthly charge shown in the first slider?
No, the way the pricing works for any LINX services, and this is based on the way we changed our pricing, last year, where we separated the charges for the physical port. So actually, if I let me just. Is it going to let me select the second port? Oh, yeah, okay. I give up. So let's do this again. So there is a small monthly charge for the port. It's on top of my head, it's £80 for am I right? £80 for a 10 gig port monthly charge, which is the cost for just the physical port itself. And if you do it like this again, it will tell you choose your location. Well, unfortunately, it hasn't updated yet, which is interesting. Oh, never do live demos. Never a good idea. We've clearly found a bug on the portal since it doesn't show the cost for the port. But hey, oh, since I haven't chosen the speed yet, there we go. Sorry, my fault. Portal works as expected. So if you add a port, so if you choose a new port, or if you add a port for your for the second service, so in the case of a 10 gig port, there will be a charge of £80 per month for the physical port, and that's just the way the LINX pricing works, where we separated the port fees from the service fees on top of it. Of course, if you have an existing service that you use for peering service, even if currently you have a 10 gig port that you use purely for peering, but you actually don't have 10 gig of peering traffic, exchange peering, you could use that existing port, downgrade the peering service, i.e. to 5 gig peering service, and then use the remaining 5 gig for Microsoft peering if you would want to.
They've just clarified the question and said for the maps part of the service, not the actual port.
So the maps part of the service, it's purely, that's the only charges. So if you're using an existing port, i.e. if we're taking an example of you're a LINX member, you only have a single 10 gig port at the moment, and that 10 gig port you use for peering at the moment, or you have a 1 gig, 2 gig peering service on that port. If you add maps to that port, there wouldn't be any other charges than the maps service charge. If you add a 50 meg maps peering, would be £30 for that 50 meg. There's no additional charge for that port, since that port is either you're already paying for it, or if it's your first port, the first 10 gig port is actually free of charge. Anyway, so the two charges are completely separate. If you order the service on an existing port, it's not going to change the charge for that port. Hopefully that clarifies it.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, just a few more questions coming in. Keep them coming because we love our questions. So how can you differentiate Azure traffic from general 8075 to determine if you specifically need Azure peering?
Well, I'm not sure why you would want to separate. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, since obviously if you have your if you look at the prefixes that are part of 8075, which actually by now are quite a large number of prefixes, but that includes all of the prefixes of all of the public facing service that Microsoft offers. So those are, as we said before, those are the prefixes that are used to house Microsoft 365, Office 365, or Microsoft Dynamics, or any of the other that's used for Teams, any of the other services. But of course, it's also the public IP addresses of any Azure services that are part of that. So yeah, there isn't really, they're all 8075 prefixes that include some of the Azure. It doesn't include your internal Azure networks, of course, since they're not part of 8075. Not sure if that answers it. If not,
just let me know. And last question for the minute, can we announce any prefix size, or is it minimum of /24?
No, you can pretty much announce any prefix size. Actually, I think it's down to /27, if I'm correct. So the minimum requirement of that normally exists of 24 does not exist over the map service. So you can announce smaller prefixes there. That restriction is not there.
Lovely, thank you.
Yes, so the only other thing, so yes, we talk. Am I still logged in? So we talked before about, so this is the Azure view in this case. Obviously we are using the map service also for ourselves. So 5459 is our own network. And this is a typical view of how you would see how you can add your prefixes and get the visibility of your prefixes within Azure. If you wish to set it up, it will show you the different validations that are performed. What else can I show you? There isn't much. I could show you. Let me see if I can. Again, this is just to keep it. This is just one of our internal routers. As I mentioned before, we're using the map service ourselves, eating our own. And in this case, this is our session with the root server. Oh, don't do live demos. Don't get a. This is our session with one of the sessions with the root server. So in this case, AS 211.386, which was said is the session. So in this case, the number of prefixes we actually receive from there is 387 these days. You can see it's all 8075 or 8068, which is the other Microsoft ASN that is available. But they all of those, and we obviously announcing our prefixes back to Microsoft across this. Let me go back to my slides, which in the end there isn't much more on the slides to say, and I think I hopefully covered most of the topics. But more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Any other questions that are there? Anything you want me to go into more detail? Very happy to do so.
Well, they're coming in. You've asked and you shall receive. So first question, will maps provide any additional benefits than bilateral public peering with Microsoft via LINX?
So the main benefits are if you comply with all of their requirements for bilateral public peering, the difference is going to be very minimal compared to maps, and there's probably no real need for you to do so unless you want to announce prefixes that are more specifics of /24. Otherwise, you're probably not going to see a huge difference, and you're probably going to be just fine with doing bilateral peering across the exchange. So if you're one of the networks which they're happy to establish the direct peering across the exchange, perfectly fine for you to do so.
Lovely, thank you. So next one, if 8075 contains all of the public Azure announcements, why is a more specific paid session required?
Why is a more specific paid session required? Not sure what is meant by that. Since in the end it's paid, but the only thing that you pay for the bandwidth across our fabric. That's the only charge that is there. So it's a bandwidth charge.
Thank you. So is MAPS distinct from LINX Cloud Connect, which will allow access to ExpressRoute?
So it's part of the Cloud Connect series of products, but it clearly is it's a slightly different product as such. So Cloud Connect includes connections to other cloud providers, i.e. ExpressRoute connections using ExpressRoute, or connections to AWS. So we even though it falls in the same category, it is not. It is more of a peering service. It's more relatable to the Exchange service rather than it is to a pure cloud service. Whereas the Cloud Connect, the ExpressRoute, AWS, they're all their private connections to your cloud services. Whereas this is really a public peering service.
Lovely, thank you. And last one for the minute, to confirm, if we currently have a 1 gig port, would we have to upgrade to a 10 gig or order an additional 10 gig port to be able to place an order?
Yes, you would have to upgrade, and ideally we would recommend that you upgrade to a 10 gig port. It's not going to cost you any more to do so if you currently have a 1 gig port. The only cost that you, of course, you need to have equipment at your end which is capable of handling a 10 gig port, but you could upgrade that 1 gig service to a 10 gig port with a 1 gig peering service on it, which means your costs are actually not going to change, since nowadays the same way that your 1 gig port is included in your membership fee, your 10 gig port with a 1 gig peering service will be included in your membership fee. So there is no, your monthly charges as such are not going to change versus the 1 gig. But of course, it means you need to have a router at your end that can take the 10 gig port. But that would be our recommended setup. You could of course also order a second port, but then you would get charged for that second port. But we couldn't deliver it on the 1 gig port, especially as it's a 1 gig port with a 1 gig peering service. There isn't really any capacity available on that anymore.
Lovely, thank you. Right, so this person has asked, is this a correct summary? The MAPS service provides LINX members the possibility to directly peer with Microsoft when you can/don't make the grades for private peering, and therefore provides an alternative option for private peering with Microsoft, otherwise not available.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Perfect. Lovely, right, that's it for the questions for the moment. But obviously we'll stay online a little bit later. Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for joining us. I hope you really enjoyed this session. Thank you for all the questions, they've been brilliant. Remember, if you have any other training topic suggestions, please just get in contact with us, let us know, and we'll kind of run more sessions like this for 2023. So both myself and Mike will stay on the call for a few extra minutes if you have any questions, but if not, thank you so much for attending our webinar, and we hope to see you again in 2023. Thank you so much.